the origins of the European Enlightenment and Renaissance. In the 13th century, the seeds of Muslim learning began to germinate in Europe. Thus, Europe awoke from the Dark Ages and entered a new era of enlightenment. Known as the Renaissance, translations of Arabic works on science were made for almost 3 centuries, starting from the 10th to the 13th century, and gradually spread throughout Europe. Professor George Saliba penned a book on this very topic and stated that there is hardly a book on Islamic civilization or on the general history of science that does not at least pretend to recognize the importance of the Islamic scientific tradition and the role this tradition played in the development of human civilization in general. Professor Thomas Arnold was of the opinion that the European Renaissance originated in Islamic Spain. Muslim Spain had written one of the brightest pages in the history of medieval Europe. Her influence had passed through Provence into the other countries of Europe, bringing into birth a new poetry and a new culture, and it was from here that Christian scholars received what of Greek philosophy and science they had to stimulate their mental activity up to the time of the Renaissance. The classical Greek works referenced in the above quote were lost to Europe during its Dark Ages. It was Muslim scholars who rescued these works by translating and preserving them in the Arabic language. They subsequently found their way back into Europe when they were translated from Arabic into Latin. Moreover, Muslims didn't just preserve them, they built upon them by studying the ancient Greek works in detail. They carried out experiments, wrote commentaries on them, and corrected the theories were necessary in the form of their own independent work. A few such examples are Al-Biruni's criticism and correction of Aristotle's philosophy in a work called Questions and Answers, Al-Khwarizmi's correction of Ptolemy's geography in his work Face of the Earth, Ibn al-Haytham's correction and refutation of Galen's optics based upon practical experiments, Al-Khwarizmi's work on measures of weights and densities surpassed his Greek predecessors. In fact, Europe took far more from the Muslim world than this book can do justice. Among other things, windmills, soap, perfume, sugar, irrigation, spices, universities, street lights, the paper industry, mass literacy, freedom of thought, architecture, poetry, hygiene, libraries, and ceramics New Arabic numerals 1, 2, 3 in particular revolutionized the mathematics of medieval Europe and consequently had a lasting effect on architecture. Cathedrals, castles, palaces, gardens, and many more structures were built in medieval Europe by the help of Islamic Spain's architectural techniques. Finally, let's perform a thought experiment. If the Quran had never been revealed, then what would be the likely state of the world today? Let's think this through step by step. From the Quran emerged the justice of Islamic law. From that justice came peace and coexistence. With that peaceful coexistence came free intellectual activity in Muslim lands. And from this freedom of literacy originated the knowledge that took Europe out of the Dark Ages and ushered in the Renaissance. Thus, isn't it reasonable to conclude that the modern world, with all of its advanced technology like the internet and mobile phones, is a direct consequence of the revelation of the Quran?